I hate everything and everyone.
Wait, all the people in charge of LA's fire response are named Kristen? I do not recall voting on a prop that said we could recruit our fire team off Grindr. What?
Is this really what we need?
She was rolled out as a woman who's the very same for the assistant fire chief who says she won't pull a man out of a fire. We don't have to call them diversity, equity, and inclusion hires. They will do that themselves.
The fire service itself is now facing difficult questions over an apparent obsession with diversity. The strip of an assistant fire chief released as a promo for its DIE policies has aged like sour milk.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Well, now hundreds of thousands of people are in the wrong place and they couldn't give it deadly consequences. Whether the firefighters are black, white, or bright green, let alone their or anything else. They just want to save their lives and their homes. The comedian and radio presenter Adam Carolla, who I will interview later in the show, gave this testimony before Congress in 2017.
I graduated North Hollywood High with a 1.7 GPA. I could not find a job. I walked to a fire station in North Hollywood. I was 19. I was living in the garage of my family home. My mom was on welfare and food stamps. And I said, can I get a job as a fireman? And they said, no, because you're not black, Hispanic, or a woman. We'll see in about 7 years.
Well, the point about DEI is not that black or female people are unfit to be firefighters. It's about a systemic misjudgment of priorities. It's about a state that spent $24 billion to end homelessness, ended up with more people living on the streets. It's about a state that suffers dozens of massive fires every single year, but leaves its biggest city with empty hydrants in the middle of the worst fire in its history. And stuck in the middle of all this are the people whose lives are being turned upside down, including many of my friends and neighbors. I have a home in Beverly Hills. This crisis is nowhere near over. And when it is, they will expect answers and change. But let me start with you, if I may, Mark Lamont Hill, because you've been getting into it with lots of people about the whole issue of DEI and whether that's had any involvement here or whatever. What's your overview here? I mean, do you think it's played any part? Are you uncomfortable about the advert I just showed with people who are sort of, looks like to me like they're playing the DEI card to justify their position?
Those are two different questions. I'll answer. Commercial misses the mark for several reasons. And it doesn't get to the heart of why you would want a DEI effort at the fire department. At the end of the day, the most important thing, as is the case whenever you have any kind of intervention like this, is that qualified people are there and that everyone has a fair shake at a high quality job, that no one is underqualified or unqualified for the job. In terms of the fire, which is your first question, I don't think that DEI has anything to do with these fires. I think there's plenty of blame to go around, and a lot of it has to do with Democrats, Democratic mayor, Democratic governor, Democratic councils. I mean, there's a lot of criticism to go around. There's a lot of targets here, but DEI to me isn't the issue here. I'm more concerned with how the police were overfunded and the fire departments were underfunded. I'm interested in climate change and having that conversation. We have to have a conversation about the kind of homes we have and the kind of homes we build these days. There are lots of things to talk about, but I don't think DEI is the blame here.
I'm mindful of a clip of Joe Rogan that's doing the rounds on social media, which is from last summer, in which he talks about a previous conversation he had with a firefighter. So people can't claim they didn't think this might happen. Literally, Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast in the world, is openly telling everybody what a firefighter told him was likely to happen. And that was a few months ago. There is an argument, Amala, that no one could have done anything to stop something quite like this because it's been a freakish set of circumstances of a Santa Ana wind, which anyone, as I say, if you live in LA long enough, you know all about the Santa Anas. They come like the Mistrals in France. And when they come, you wake up and you a lot of howling wind and your garden's covered in crap, and we're all used to it. What's different here is the winds were at 100 miles an hour. It's hurricane force winds, and it coupled with a fire. And when you have 100 mile an hour winds blowing across a city with a fire, it's a perfect hellish storm. So let me preface this by saying, it may be nothing could have stopped this from doing what it did. However, I think you have a view, contrary to what Mark said, that DEI and wokeness have played a part in the failures here. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we're going to learn in the days to come about these fires. As Jillian and I believe Mark mentioned, we're still waiting to see the cause of a lot of these fires. It's totally understandable to me that this is what happens in LA, that we can pretty much imagine that this is going to occur to some extent. But we can also see a department that has, in my opinion, wasted time and resources on these woke agenda pieces like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where could that time and where could those resources have gone? What could they have been allocated to when it comes to response to these fires? Not only that, I'm seeing reports on social media, I don't know about anybody else, of arsonists, looters. And this is sort of a culture that we've created here in Los Angeles, here in California, with the way that we've been soft on crime, with the different policies that we've pushed forward. So honestly, I think we're at this moment of just waiting for information. But as Jillian said, you can also see that reservoir that held what should have been 117 million gallons of water was not working. The brush cleanup that should have been happening for decades was not happening. You have Rick Caruso here in Los Angeles, who was running for leadership. He managed to save his land, his properties, and he did so through proper planning and being proactive. So what could we have done in this city? Probably a lot.
Yeah. I mean, Mark Lamont Hill, you know, I saw you shaking your head there, but I'm not quite sure what you're shaking your head about. Because anyone who's lived in LA, like I said, it's been clear. Two things have been clear. Newsom has had a lot of rhetoric about being tough on crime and sorting out the homeless problem and so on. And the complete reverse has happened. You know, even in Beverly Hills, where I live, and I go to lots of other parts of the city when I'm in LA, but even in Beverly Hills, the degree of homelessness, the degree of crime, violent crime involving guns, right in the middle of Beverly Hills at lunchtime, shootouts in restaurants and things, that never used to happen, I can tell you. It was never like it is now. So there's no doubt to my mind that when Amala says what she said there about issues like the crime increasing and so on, it's indisputable. If you live there, you know it.
Right. I mean, if one were not watching this video and only hearing it, they would think that I shook my head when we were talking about crime and homelessness. I didn't.
Well, you seem to.
When I shook my head,
I'm sorry.
What I shook my head to was the issue around the quote unquote woke policies and DEI policies. Right. That specific is what I'm addressing. So we don't have to guess. I'm telling you what it was. The idea that there's some relationship between the fires and the department's investment in DEI policies. Even Amala herself has said, you know, we're going to find out if that's the case. But why are we beginning from a premise that that is the case? Is anything possible? Sure, but there's no evidence of it. Also, the idea of calling it a wasted effort to me is a bit bizarre. As I'm sure you know, or maybe you don't, I'm talking to the audience, not you two in particular, the department had a significant problem with harassment. The department had a significant problem with racial discrimination. It's acknowledged that the department had multiple firefighters sued. The department acknowledged that they were overrepresented by white men and underrepresented by other groups. And to be clear, that's a statistical analysis. That's not a subjective assessment. It's not a moral judgment. I'm saying they're overrepresented demographically. So in light of that, my question would be, if you don't think they needed an inclusion or equity initiative, how should they have responded? This is to Amala. How should they have responded to the proven cases of discrimination and harassment that were happening in the department? What should they have done instead of having an initiative?
Okay, well, fair enough. Amala?
Yeah. Sure, I can answer that. Yeah, when we're looking at those cases that you've just spoken about, sure, we should hear out every single case of harassment and discrimination, especially if we can prove that it's on the basis of race, or we can prove that there is ill intent within a department. Now, that's not what's being articulated by the LAFD. They are saying that they are looking specifically for people of certain races, of particular gender backgrounds, and we should be moving towards a race-neutral future. If you want people to be judged on the content of their character, of their abilities, their intelligence, their strength, which is very important when it comes to the fire department, you should do exactly that. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a woman. It has nothing to do with your race. And as we saw that assistant fire chief state, she's speaking about diversity, equity, and inclusion through a lens of wanting people who look like her to be in the department, wanting to be able to show up to houses of California residents that apparently look like her so she can serve them better. And she's not really speaking to her capabilities. As she even stated in her own video, she'd be incapable of carrying a man out of a fire. So your articulation of diversity, equity, inclusion is very different from what we're getting. And let's not forget that diversity, equity, and inclusion is based out of critical race theory, which is fundamentally flawed. If we truly want race neutrality and people to be judged based off of their abilities, we should do exactly that.
Facts.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Mark, I'll come back to you.
So you said three things
hang on,
that
Mark.
weren't
I'll come back to you for a
sorry.
quick response, and I go to Gillian. But Mark, you know, it's come at the same week that we saw Mark Zuckerberg basically ending all of Meta's DEI programs, along with a complete reversal of everything else you could call woke policy. I mean, it seems to me that the wind is blowing. Well, I won't use that phrase because there's obviously a much bigger, more problematic wind blowing, but there is a change in direction. from companies that you would say were very liberal skewed, like Meta and others, to just get rid of all DEI programs because they've concluded, and you may have a view about this, that they actually they are wrong. They promote mediocrity. They're not meritocratic in the way that companies should be, in my view. And it's happening quite fast now since the big Trump win over Kamala Harris, who represented all this woke stuff to her bootstraps. What's your response to that?
Well, I think you're right to say that corporate investment in DEI was always cynical. They never cared about diversity, equity, or inclusion. They did it because it was popular. After the uprisings and following the murder of George Floyd, it was popular to say you were down with DEI, so they did it. And a lot of those companies never actually even turned in the money. They never actually followed up on the promises that they made. And now that it's no longer popular, they're pulling back. Corporate America does what's good for business, not what's good for people. But I reject your claim that DEI is not meritocratic or it undermines meritocracy. The data contradicts that. The decades of studies contradict that. I also reject Amala's claim that the fire department was doing something systemic in response to something that was individual. She said they should have adjudicated those cases, but not going on this big initiative to have different hiring practices. I think maybe what you missed was the complaints themselves were about a systemic failure to hire qualified Black people, to hire qualified women. So again, when you talk about DEI, it's not about getting unqualified Black and brown and women in a room of qualified white men. It's about saying there's 10 qualified people in this room. The first 6 we've hired have been white men. Maybe the next 4 shouldn't be, when demographically there's enough Black people here or enough women or whomever.
But hang on, but that's exactly the point, which is when it comes to firefighting, actually, no, sorry, I just want the best people for the job. Sorry, I do. If I'm a homeowner in LA, I don't care what color they are, what they are, what they are.
May I ask you a question about that, Piers?
Hang on, Mark. I don't care about any of it. I just care, are they the best available people to save me from a fire?
You're misrepresenting the issue, though. No one is saying that the best qualified people shouldn't be hired. The issue is, again, there are 10 people in a room.
Yeah.
They're going to hire 8 of them. The first 6 they've hired have been white men.
Yeah.
Of the remaining people, there are qualified white men and qualified Black men and qualified Black women. The issue historically in that department has been, even when the women have been qualified, even when the Black men have been qualified, they still have not gotten hired. It's not that Black people have gotten not hired and they're unqualified. It's they've been qualified and not hired. And so they're trying to respond to that by being intentional about saying, hey, let's bring in some qualified Black people to augment the qualified white men as well. So no one wants an unqualified firefighter. You know what I mean? No one wants an unqualified surgeon. But if you keep not hiring qualified Black people, we got to do something about it.
Except clearly Mark Lamont Hill here wants unqualified Black women working as firefighters. I'm sure he's completely over the moon that we have an overweight Black woman who is not willing to pull him out of a fire. According to him, we need way more people like that. If I'm in a fire, I want to see a gigantic axe-wielding Viking bust in the door. Yeah. I would also be happy with a Mandingo warrior. Give me a Mongolian raider. Give me some giant warrior fighter that's going to come in there and can pick me up and can, pick up the people I love and get us out of there into safety. And I am not interested in who they're having bedroom fun with. There are a whole lot of spicy takes in that Piers Morgan clip. I would love to know what you guys think about women in firefighting and DEI in firefighting. I'm more inclined to say that if women can meet the same physical standards that men can, then they should be able to be firefighters. However, seems like when we do that, then they start dropping and lowering the standards, and that helps absolutely no one. So that pushes me towards the, just forget about it. Don't even bother trying to have women in there in the first place. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Should women be firefighters? And what happens when they get pregnant? Are you comfortable with pregnant women trying to drag people out of fires? I know I definitely don't want to start off with one emergency and then morph it into a completely different emergency. But once again, I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Red Dawn Daily with your host, me, Dawn Marie, and sometimes Leroy. Yes, this is Leroy's stunt double, Arthur the Pomeranian. Hey, Arthur. Hey, Arthur. Can you say hi? Yeah, hi, Arthur. Thanks for being a stand-in. Oh, I know. Oh, it's hard. Oh, is it hard? Oh, yeah. It's okay. I guess not everybody loves the camera.